Thanks. Let's bring in now Republican Senator Eric Schmitt of Missouri, member of the Judiciary and Armed Services Committee. And he's also got a new book out. It's called The Last Line of Defense: How to Beat the Left in Court. It is available now. Senator, good to have you. Speaking of court, you're a former AG, and, you know, there could be a pretty big legal fight here in Chicago if the president does indeed send in the National Guard. That's at least according to the mayor and the governor there that are threatening legal action. What do you think of this idea to wait and see if Chicago residents and perhaps even the mayor invites him in?
Well, I think President Trump's been clear he wants to be asked, I think, to come in. I think it's the politics of this is shocking, I'll be honest with you. I can't actually believe the Democrats are on the wrong side of another 80-20 issue, which is cracking down on violent crime. You have a president now who's taken on issues that people said were intractable, that were problematic, you couldn't solve. The problem at the border, remember they said that Joe Biden threw his hands up, said, I can't do anything about it. President Trump came in, we've solved the border crisis. Now you've got this crime in one of the, the worst crime cities in America, Washington, D.C., and you have an 85% reduction in carjackings, a 50% reduction in robberies. He's solving the problem. So you would think that people who have this problem be asking for help, but instead what they're doing is succumbing to their Trump derangement syndrome and saying no. So you've got the politics of it, which works for President Trump. It doesn't work for the Democrats here. But more importantly, this is a quality of life issue that the American people want leadership on, and President Trump is providing that leadership. So as far as I'm concerned, we need to do what we need to do to protect citizens in their own communities from violent crime.
Well, here's how Joseph Epstein looks at it. He's a longtime Chicago guy. He wrote this in the Wall Street Journal, an op-ed here. He said, who's afraid of the National Guard? President Trump has installed federal troops to fight crime in Washington. He's suggested to do the same in Chicago. He blames the Windy City's crime in part on its incompetent mayor, but the city has long had lots of crime. It almost specializes in crime. Chicago politicians seem to view an epidemic of random violence as preferable to the infusion of National Guard troops into the city. I say, bring on the troops, foot soldiers, the cavalry, the artillery, and then anything else you've got short of missiles and nuclear weapons. The time for the killing to end has long passed. And the thing is, Senator, the Democrats always point to these crime stats, and yes, it does show that crime in certain areas or certain types of crime have come down. But by and large, especially in these crime-ridden neighborhoods in Chicago, they don't feel it. You know, they suffer through this fear every single day, as do their kids. So why not reach across the aisle or look at a president who wants to help and send in National Guard troops that are not to be feared and try to work together?
Yeah, and a lot of times they compare those numbers to incredibly high 2020 numbers, which were insanely high. So there's still, look, if you talk to real people in real America, they know it's a problem, especially in those communities. In St. Louis, where I'm from, right, we have a surge of the largest number of permanent FBI anti-violent crime agents coming into St. Louis, where we've worked directly with Kash Patel on that in this administration. They are willing to help solve the problems. And for me, violent crime, as a former prosecutor, attorney general, there are no red jerseys here. There are no blue jerseys here. These are our fellow citizens. These are our fellow Americans who shouldn't have to live like this. And we should never accept the idea that young boys in particular young black boys, are being murdered on the streets every day. Why would we accept that? We shouldn't accept that. We should challenge the assumptions of the past. That's what this president is doing. He's saying we have levers where we can help. So shame on J.B. Pritzker for, he's running for president. He wants to be the chief resistor. There are people dying, and we ought to be working together to solve that problem. President Trump has extended the olive branch here, and I hope more mayors and governors take him up on it.
He's got to face the fact that crime was a big issue in 2024, and I can't imagine it won't be in 2026 or 28. Very quickly here, 10 seconds left with you, Senator. John Thune, when you get back, are you going to talk to him about maybe putting Democrats on the record here on crime? Under the House is coming up with a slew of crime bills. What about the Senate?
Yeah, I think that actually I had a conversation with the Senator Thune about that very thing yesterday. And I also think that if there is an extension that's necessary for the National Guard to be present in Washington, D.C., that has to come before Congress. And we'll see if Democrats actually support what the mayor has said now, thanking President Trump for the help in Washington, D.C. So I think there's a few issues that will be coming up as it relates to violent crime. And again, we ought to be working together here, but the American people are going to see who's on their team and who isn't.
All right. Senator Schmidt, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you back on the Hill next week.
Take care.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.